Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast from Taiwan. I'm Gaurav Sawant. There is a sharp spike in tension between China and Taiwan. Just as Taiwan started its air exercises and launched its latest F-16 Viper fighter jets, China launched 51 aircraft. 25 of those crossed the median line between China and Taiwan, and these included an H-6 bomber and Su-30 air superiority fighters. What does this indicate? Is this a sharp spike in tension that could actually lead to friction? We'll tell you much more during the course of the next half hour. As always, we get started with the headlines on India First. Political war over Rohingyas gets bigger. Centre accuses the Arvind Kejriwal government of promising accommodation for illegal foreigners. Aam Aadmi Party says first ascertain who took the decision to resettle them. No end to chief ministerial face Nataka in Karnataka while Basavaraj Bomai's face hangs in balance. Congress infighting implodes. D.K. Shivakumar publicly demands to become chief minister face once again. Escalating Savarkar showdown. BJP workers try to ghirao Siddaramaia's car. Congress and Muslim groups protest after Kerala's school kid dresses up as Veer Savarkar. Film Kashmir Files uplifts Bollywood and splits Bollywood wide open. Filmmaker Anurag Kashyap doesn't want the film to be India's Oscar entry. Vivek Agnihotri responds with genocide denier jibe. The tension is real. The tension is escalating. On India First, we get you never before seen images of Taiwan's exercises. Taiwan's Air Force uses the latest F-16 Vipers. These are the upgraded F-16s with new avionics. Now, these fighter jets loaded with their AMRAAMs or air-to-air missiles and Harpoon anti-ship missiles took off in a night firing exercise. Not one, not two, but multiple F-16 Vipers took off. Now, China launched 51 of its own fighter jets and bombers. While they were around Taiwan, they were spotted around Taiwan. 25 of these aircraft, including an H-6 bomber, actually crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait between mainland China and Taiwan. When Taiwan launched its own combat air patrol, the Chinese aircraft returned. But is this not signaling a real escalation? And this tension seems to be a notch higher this time. We bring you this ground report.
Advanced Taiwanese F-16V fighters roaring into the night sky. A show of force and a mega muscle flex in the face of China's uninterrupted campaign of intimidation. Seen here at the key Hualien airbase on Taiwan's mountainous east coast, weapons are slung onto these F-16Vs, Taiwan's most up-to-date combat jets, including Harpoon anti-ship missiles capable of long-range hits on Chinese naval vessels. The Hualien base, which has hangars cut out of the side of a mountain, has two pilots on duty at any point of time, sitting in their flight suits to be airborne in 6 minutes flat. That means the base exists on scramble alert to swoop up and engage any Chinese aerial threat at super short notice.
The tension between the Taiwan Strait is getting higher, and it's obvious in knowing that. But that's still what we're training for, and it's what we're preparing for. So they come and we rise, and so our scramble jet will never stop, and we will stop their offender and outside our defense outside our ADIZ. I won't say there's a lot of change, but our frequency to scramble is getting higher, and so I think the tension from the in the Taiwan Strait is definitely higher.
Taiwan has been converting its 141 F-16A/B jets to the much more advanced F-16V type and is boosting fleet strength by ordering 66 new F-16Vs from the United States. These jets will have more advanced avionics, weapons and radar systems to better face down the Chinese Air Force, including its J-20 stealth fighters that have been busy buzzing Taiwanese air defenses.
After China carried out its war drills, it's Taiwan that's actually sending across a very clear message. So the latest F-16Vs or the Vipers, they were a part of this exercise loaded with Harpoon anti-ship missiles and the Sidewinders and the AIM-120 air-to-air missiles. It's a very clear signal to expansionist forces that they can be countered both in the air and in water.
One of the key weapons wielded by Taiwan's F-16V is the AIM-9X Sidewinder air-to-air missile capable of hot pursuit and kill of Chinese jets at visual range.
We condemn the Chinese Communists' continued provocative actions in the Taiwan Strait, disrupting peace within the region. But we must say, maintaining the intensity of our combat readiness training, ensuring the task of combat training is our force's responsibility.
In the face of nearly 100 air intrusions in the last 4 days alone, Taiwan's Air Force is also displaying some of its most powerful anti-aircraft weaponry. Swiss-made GDF 006 anti-aircraft guns and the Tiancun-3 anti-aircraft system, a complex surface-to-air weapon that can hit both aircraft and missiles.
Taiwan Air Force is a very professional Air Force. They may not have very large numbers of aircraft, but as you would know that they have the latest version of F-16 and the numbers are going to increase. Every time PRC aircraft comes into their ADZ, they launch the interceptors and they always intercept them.
Also remember that Taiwan has formidably armed Apache and Black Hawk helicopters for any ground support. Taiwan may not be alone if a battle truly begins courtesy China, but the tiny island, for its size, is formidably armed and capable of giving the aggressor a bloody nose. The muscle flex is designed as a counter-reminder to Beijing of this precise fact. With Gaurav Sawant in Taipei, Taiwan, Bureau Report, India Today.
So if Beijing is trying to coerce Taipei, Taiwan is actually pushing back against that coercion. What's the world doing? We will tell you about that during the course of the broadcast. But I want to bring in our guests into this conversation, and two of the finest voices who actually understand China well join me on the show. I have Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, former Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Naval Command, a naval aviator himself, joining me on the broadcast. And I also have with me Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. He's been posted in China. He's been posted extensively in this region. Admiral Sinha, I want to understand from you. You heard the Taiwan Air Force pilot who said tensions are higher, the frequency of violations by China and the cap patrols or the combat air patrols that Taiwan mounts, the frequency has increased. What does this indicate? Is this a rise in tension, that an escalation that can be contained, or could this actually lead to friction or conflict?
Well, thank you, Gaurav, for getting me on the program again. And nice to see you reporting from ground zero. My own impression is that from the time PRC has done the last mindless exercise, crossing the median line will become a new normal. And this is exactly what you're seeing now, that their aircraft are crossing the median line, that is the central line in the Taiwan Strait, which separates the two countries, equally. And therefore, this is going to remain so. It is obviously provoked by the Chinese, the PRC, and what the Taiwanese are doing is in their own self-defense. And I think that it is necessary for Taiwan to display their resolve and make sure that the PRC does not get away just like that. And you will see,
Okay.
you just heard the Taiwanese voice a little while ago, that every time the interception takes place, the PRC aircraft return back. The point is that all the F-16 weaponry, what you mentioned a little while ago, and I think Shiv Arur was mentioning, they are all proven in battle, whereas none of the Chinese weapon systems are proven. They have been firing in water, they have been firing all over the place, but we do not know what the accuracy will be. So even the PRC will be very careful. So the tension is mounting, and I hope that it does not lead to friction, but we all have to keep a watch that should it, moment the first shot is fired, Gaurav, it's going to be a messy war. But
and how far are we from that first shot being fired? Because some may argue that this escalation, the repeated crossing of the median line, the firing of missiles on top of Taiwan, that's a grave escalation. And is that actually, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, becoming a new normal? Is that an indication that diplomacy hasn't succeeded at all, or diplomacy is perhaps China's way of postponing the inevitable till it's stronger to strike militarily?
Good evening, Gaurav. The tensions have been escalating, Chinese provocations have been escalating, and there are periods when in weeks there are tens of sorties, and the size of the sorties are increasing. So clearly China is upping the ante. But China knows that it is a very difficult challenge. It will be the biggest gamble that of high risk, high reward that Xi Jinping can undertake. And it will be like a geopolitical tsunami if China were to attack Taiwan. And let me briefly explain. It will be a game changer. If China were to succeed, it will be the beginning of the Chinese century and the terminal decline of the West. If China fails, that's the end of Xi Jinping. So the stakes are very high. Now, the imponderables are galore, because as my friend Shekhar is saying, and you were mentioning, Taiwan is very well armed. And there is a bit of uncertainty. There is the Taiwan Relations Act, under which the West is, or the US is supposed to protect Taiwan. But there are question marks. So there are so many imponderables, but just one extra, I'll take 5 more seconds. The danger more is not of so much of a conflict, which may not be happening, but the danger is of a miscalculation. Because there could be a communication error, there could be something where there is a misunderstanding. That, to my mind, is the biggest danger, and that could lead to an escalation which no side wants at the moment.
Okay. And what is the world doing? That's the point we were coming to. Let me, for the moment, take you a little away from China and Taiwan, and let me take you to Australia. One of the biggest military exercises is all set to begin. Exercise Pitch Black. So you have 100 fighter jets and military transport aircraft and tankers and mid-air refuelers and AWACS, 100 fighters, plus 2,500 air warriors from 17 countries, and countries from the United States to Germany to Canada to the United Kingdom to France to UAE to India, which is sending the Su-30 MKIs, to Indonesia, to the Philippines, to Australia, New Zealand. They're all participating in one exercise. What does this indicate? Take a look at this report. We'll discuss further.
100 military aircraft, 2,500 air warriors, 17 countries. At the Royal Australian Air Force Base Darwin, one of the biggest joint Air Force exercises is getting underway with the aim of enhancing regional security through multinational operations. The aim is also to check interoperability at a time when China has emerged a big threat in the region. State-of-the-art fighter jets of the United States, Canada, UK, France, the Netherlands, will fly with the Air Force fighter jets from India, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, UAE and New Zealand, among a total of 17 countries.
The government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legal government representing the whole of China. The One China principle is a prerequisite for Taiwan's participation in external economic cooperation. China opposes any attempt by a country to negotiate and sign economic and trade initiatives with the Taiwan region.
Germany is participating in exercise Pitch Black 2022 with 6 Eurofighter Typhoon jets for the first time. The German aircraft are also to fly to Japan after the exercise and will fly past Taiwan, where China has been conducting a series of very aggressive war drills and live firing exercises. India has sent 6 Sukhoi Su-30 MKI air superiority fighters for the 3-week-long exercise. The Su-30s are accompanied by an IL-78 mid-air refueling tanker as well. Indian Air Force pilots will test their skills against some of the best pilots and aircraft, including F-35s flown by the Royal Australian Air Force. Live firing drills are also part of the massive exercise at the Bradshaw Field Training Area and Delamere Air Weapons Range. While this is a pre-scheduled exercise, this time's Pitch Black will be focused and coloured on the developing situation between China and Taiwan and what each of these countries will need to do in response if push comes to shove. Regional security and closer ties throughout the Indo-Pacific region is the buzzword of the exercise, where organizers have made it clear it is neither China-centric nor does the exercise have an overarching central theme. The exercise is taking place after a gap of 4 years and will continue for 3 weeks. With Gaurav Sawant in Taipei, Taiwan, Bureau Report, India Today.
You're a fighter pilot yourself. Your appreciation of this exercise when they say it's all about securing Indo-Pacific, but also saying it's not China-centric.
Well, Gaurav, it may not be China-centric in those many words, but certainly it is peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific centric. And I think that says it all because it has a much broader aim. Interoperability, as you mentioned, of these aircraft, though all of them are from the free world. They are not from, an autocratic country. So we are looking at an autocracy versus the free world. And for that, the ideologies are very different. And anything will be done to protect the free world, free and open sea, and make sure that those who subscribe to this idea are protected well. So I think that it should not be taken lightly, though it is a coincidence that it is happening at this time. But it has to be taken quite seriously, and it is playing on the minds of China. In fact, they made a statement few days back as to what are the Germans doing here so far away from home. Well, they are not only in Australia, they're going to come closer.
Absolutely. They're going all the way to Japan and they'll fly past Taiwan when they go to Japan. Now, should China be concerned about this, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash? Is this a signal to China? And I want to understand when people talk about freedom of navigation patrols in the South and East China Sea, when China was militarizing these waters between 2014 and 20, the world stood and watched. Every country in the region protested, and yet the free world did precious little, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash.
You have hit the nail in the head. That is the whole challenge. There's a very big question mark whether the so-called free world will walk the talk. Now, certainly there is a lot of anger against China. The designs of China are very well known. And there are signals of joint exercises. The scale and sophistication is growing. Is China losing sleep? No, I don't think at the moment China is losing sleep over it. For the simple reason, Gaurav, Chinese economy is very well integrated with the global economy. And as of today, no country wants to put up with the pain or bear the cost of snapping ties with China. Now, that is one very big difference because even the US and the corporate, the US is a very, very strong lobby. So that is the big challenge because there is the difference is that China can pay any price regardless of the regardless of the price, to pursue its political objectives. The free world cannot. Now, will they walk the talk is a big question. So and even the strategic community in the US and the Western world is divided whether or not they should take action if it has to be taken. So yes, the reason China reacts this fashion is that they are very used to very loud denunciations to preempt any further escalation or to scare away countries, but they are not very worried at the moment. However, what happens tomorrow is anybody's guess. The the free world has to bite the bullet and decide that they'll bear the cost of taking on China. Absolutely. But will they do that? I'm not sure.
Well, you have the 7th Fleet commander who says, don't let this become the new normal. But will America actually get the 7th Fleet to come to these waters, go through Taiwan Strait? We'll track that. But imagine if there is an escalation, if there is friction, what would it lead to? India today is shivered with this report.
Can China capture Taiwan using air power? With such a giant air force, what would such an air campaign look like? Let's get one thing totally clear. Any air battle between China and Taiwan will be a seriously bloody affair, and we'll tell you why. For starters, if military air combat is already a difficult and risky affair, it is exponentially more so over ocean. And since Taiwan is an island about 200 kilometers off China's coast, China's air power campaign will have to be a maritime affair. In March 2021, in a demonstration flight that shadowed the current crisis, China conducted an aerial mission specifically focused on aerially surrounding Taiwan and cutting it off entirely from the eastern side. The mission showed Chinese H-6 bomber fleets escorted by fighters flying through the Bashi Strait that separates Taiwan from the Philippines and arriving on the vulnerable eastern side of Taiwan, the key to debilitating the island. Of course, in a real combat scenario, a high-tech Taiwanese Air Force wouldn't let the bombers fly so easily. Plus, China has limited experience in over-ocean flights. But these are broad simulations. That China is even practicing such flights means it is in the realm of its warfare plans. It's crucial to remember that in any potential air battle, Taiwan wouldn't be alone. The US Navy's 7th Fleet remains deployed in the Pacific east of Taiwan with heavy-duty aerial combat assets. Alongside Japanese and American fighter assets stationed in Japan, committed to protecting Taiwan from China. Which means any Chinese air combat plans to encircle Taiwan will be met with brutal high-tech resistance. If China attempts an aerial encirclement of Taiwan, it will have to contend with America's F-18 Super Hornets of the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier and formidable F-22 Raptor stealth fighters stationed in Japan, among others. There will likely be heavy losses on both sides, but one thing remains certain. The invasion and control of Taiwan may be a difficult, logistically nightmarish prospect for China, but everything that China is now doing around Taiwan points to the reality of the possibility. With Gaurav Sawant in Taipei, Taiwan, Bureau Report, India Today.
Admiral Sinha, last 30 seconds on the broadcast. Do you think USS Ronald Reagan or other aircraft carriers or the carrier battle group, will it come to this region? Will that send across a message, or it's only jaw, talk, and no walk the talk?
Gaurav, it is a declared policy of the US government that if China the PRC tries to forcibly occupy Taiwan, it will come to its rescue. So I think they should not be missed out at all. that if it is going to be a physical war, it's going to be a bombing, it's going to be a forcible occupation, then very much the Americans will pitch in. This is my confidence. The second point is, recently there is a white paper after the last exercise that the PRC has issued, and there it says that he will still prefer a peaceful reunification. So let us see what happens tomorrow. But I think preparedness is the name of the game.
Be prepared, and Taiwan's actually increasing its defense budget, talking about more unmanned combat aerial vehicles and longer range missiles. But there's also the apprehension that China could actually begin small, take one of the islands first, and then come for mainland. But over the course of the next several days that we continue to report from Taiwan, we will discuss these options and these developments. I'll have another big story coming for you on India First tomorrow, but that is all we have time for. Admiral Vishnu Prakash and Admiral Sinha for joining me. Ambassador Vishnu Prakash and Admiral Sinha, many thanks for joining me.